Hello, and welcome to 5 Minute Math. Today we are looking at the geometric concept of lines, specifically how we can use the slope formula to verify whether lines are parallel or perpendicular, and we'll do it in 5 minutes or less. So we have two lines that are graphed here and they look parallel, but how can we know for sure? Well, we can do so if we find the slope of each. So let's label these two lines as line 1 and line 2. And so I want to find the slope of each of these lines. And so I need to individually calculate the difference between their y values and their x values. That's our slope formula. So let's just label our first line with our y values and our x values. And it doesn't matter which one you make as y sub 2 or x sub 2. So my first one is going to be a y minus 4. Those are the change in y. And then the change in x is going to be negative 7 minus, and then I've got another 4. Okay. So what I have here is I've got a 4, and then I've got a negative 7 minus 4, that's negative 11. So if I wanted to just look at it, it would be negative 4/11. So it is a fraction, but that's fine. It tracks simply because we know that negative slopes move down from left to right, so this one moves down from left to right. Let's see what our slope is for the second line. And in this case, I'll make my x sub 2 and my y sub 2 down here. It doesn't really matter what order you put them in. X sub 1, y sub 1. So my y sub 2 is negative 8. And then I'm going to get a plus 4. And I just simplified that because what I ended up doing was I did a minus negative 4. So that ends up being a plus 4. So then I got a 12 for my x's minus 1. So that ends up being a positive, or excuse me, a negative 4 over a positive 11. Now that's different than what I had up there. I had a positive 4 over negative 11, but really that negative sign, we can just move that down here. So you notice that the slope of line 1 matches the slope of line 2. So that is our rule. So parallel lines have identical slopes. So if you find two slopes and they are identical, that means they are parallel. That's how we prove it in geometry. We don't just use the eyeball test, we have to prove it. So we can say the slope of line 1 is parallel. We'll use that as the slope of line 2. So let's look at perpendicular lines. So now I've got two lines and they look perpendicular. But how do we know for sure using geometry? Well, I'm going to use the slope formula again to find the slope of each of these. And so I'm just going to label this as my x sub 2, my y sub 2, my x sub 1, and my y sub 1. Let's find the slope of line 1. See what we get. So that's going to be a 3 minus a negative 4. So that's going to be ending up being a 3 plus 4. And I've got a 9 minus a negative 5, ending up being a 9 plus 5, because the two negatives cancel out. So what do I get? 7 over 14, which is going to give me 1/2. So I've got a positive slope of 1/2. So let's look at my L sub 2. And so let's make this my x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, and y sub 2. So I'm going to take my 4, and I'm going to subtract a negative 10. And then I'm going to take my negative 4 and subtract a 3. Look what I get. I get a positive 14 over a negative 7, which ends up being a negative 2 over 1. Now I'm going to leave it as a negative 2 over 1 rather than just a negative 2, because I want you to look at my two different slopes. You notice that they are reciprocals of each other. So one is 1/2, one is 2 over 1, and they're negative reciprocals. So perpendicular lines, so that's my representation for perpendicular lines, have slopes that are negative reciprocals. That's going to be our term, negative reciprocal slopes. And so since we can say that 1/2 and my negative 2 over 1 have opposite signs and they are reciprocal, then we can say with authority that these two are perpendicular lines because they have those negative reciprocal slopes. And that's really what we're looking for. So parallel lines have identical slopes, and then perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes.